Good morning, everybody. I think we're just waiting for folks to log on. I'm Dave Augustine, a director with the Pelham Welland Chamber of Commerce, and we are thrilled to have this session. We're just going to be starting in a few moments here. So as we let people log on for the next 3 minutes or so, we're just thrilled that you're joining us today. So thank you very much. So we're just going to get started in a couple minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's afternoon right now. I think we are at the noon hour. Is that correct, everybody? Are we ready to go? That's perfect. So thank you very much, folks, for attending our session today. We really, really appreciate it. We have a special session for you today. I'm Dave Augustine. I'm a director with the Welland Pelham Chamber of Commerce, sitting in for Dolores Fabiano, whose picture we have here as the executive director, but she, the staff person's in the background running this and recording it for us. Dolores, unfortunately, is unable to join us today. So she asked me to sit in. So we would like to start first by thanking our partner, the Job Gym. So we run this periodic series of lunch and learn every month. And our partner for this is the Job Gym, and they have been a partner for many, many years and do an exceptional job working together with the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Amanda Shannon from the Job Gym to say a few words. Amanda?
Thanks very much, Dave. Welcome, everyone. As Dave said, my name is Amanda Shannon. I'm the employer specialist with Job Gym. I'm also a board director with the Fort Erie Chamber of Commerce. And Job Gym is very excited to be sponsoring this year's series of Lunch and Learns. I'm going to take a moment to put in a shameless plug for us right now, but Job Gym does offer a suite of services through Employment Ontario. Because we are funded through the provincial government, there are no costs for employers or job seekers to access our services. And some of the programs that we facilitate are the Canada-Ontario Job Grant Program, Better Jobs Ontario, and the Employment Service. So our Employment Service program offers individualized employment coaching with our qualified employment counselors. So that includes a variety of things, everything from career exploration right through to building a strong resume cover letter, understanding current labor market trends in our area, as well as employer contacts. Something new for this program is we have just been given the green light to work with students. So if you happen to know a student who is legally allowed to work in Ontario, so they're working age, they're able to work at least 20 hours a week, and unfortunately not an international student, we still don't have the green light on that, but for now, we are able to work with high school and post-secondary students that do meet those two criteria. So if you happen to know someone that fits that, feel free to send them on into our office and we'd be happy to help them. And with that being said, I'm looking forward to learning from our panelists today and would like to turn things back over to Dave. Thanks very much for joining us today.
That's great. Thanks so much, Shannon. Amanda Shannon, we really, really appreciate this. Thank you very much for the ongoing sponsorship of the Job Gym. So thank you. So today we welcome Bryan Rose, who's the Executive Director of the Niagara Community Foundation, along with Gary Talossi, who is a retired Senior Wealth Advisor, and Chris Wilson, who is a partner with Wilson and Optowski Barristers and Solicitors. The format of today's session is going to be a little bit different maybe than some of our other sessions, and so we're in for a treat. Bryan will actually conduct a little bit of a fireside chat. I don't know if you have, I don't see any fires there, Bryan, but
too warm for that, Dave. Too warm for that.
Okay, perfect. Fireside chat with Gary and Chris. And I'm going to be in the background looking at your questions that you might have. So I understand from Bryan and Chris and Gary, they're going to be giving us a little bit of a session there, and then there will be lots of time for questions. So please fill those out. I think we're going to be using the chat function for that, and I'm monitoring that, and just send that to hosts and panelists. And at the end, we'll be asking those questions. We want to address those at the end of the discussion. So it's my pleasure to turn things over to, oh, and that's Brianna in the background. If you see her in the background walking back and forth. So anyways, those are all the folks that are here. So I'm going to turn it over to Bryan. Thanks so much, Bryan, for being here and overseeing this session. Off to you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And thank you to the Chamber for this wonderful opportunity to speak to the group today, and for this web series to go out into the community after we're done. And thank you to Amanda and JobGen for sponsoring these sort of information sessions. Whether a variety of topics, it's great that people take the time and have a chance to learn and figure some new stuff out. So it's my pleasure today to share this screen with two superstar Niagara Community Foundation volunteers, Chris Wilson and Gary Talasi. Chris and Gary are both members of our Port Colborne Community Fund Committee. They have been tremendous allies and advocates for the Community Foundation. Just a little bit about the Community Foundation as we kick things off, a shameless plug, as Amanda said. So the Niagara Community Foundation, we are a charity of charities. We are one of the largest funders here in the Niagara region, and we represent all 12 municipalities here in Niagara, from Grimsby to Fort Erie, from Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. So we are a charity of charities. I often call us the Switzerland of charities. And we provide granting funding to the charitable sector, mainly here in the Niagara region, but throughout the Golden Horseshoe as well. And the one way we do that is through endowed funds. That's where assets are invested. And then it's the investment revenue that we make on those investments that are then granted out to the charitable sector. We were founded in the year 2000 with two $100,000 gifts, $100,000 from the Branscombe family and $100,000 from Niagara Credit Union, which we all know is Meridian Credit Union now. And as of today, we have assets of around $83.5 million. And last year alone, we granted out $3.5 million to the charitable sector. So we're very proud of the impact that we have. These are big topics and really interesting things for people to think about these days. Estate planning, legacy giving, giving while you're living, as they say. So really excited to have Gary, who is now recently retired. So, he's still knows his stuff always, a retired wealth manager, and Chris Wilson, who is an estate lawyer, amongst other things, many talents. So Chris and Gary and I are just going to talk a little bit about the importance of making considerations in your estate to the charitable sector. So Chris, Gary, welcome. Thanks for partnering with me on another one of these. The last time we were together for one of these, it was a snowstorm in Wainfleet. Yeah. So glad to do this virtually. So thanks for being here. So without further ado, I'm just going to kick it off. Chris, I might start this one off with you, and then Gary, please add in. Chris, from your perspective as an estate lawyer, what are the benefits for one of your clients or anyone to leave legacy gift, a charitable gift in their estate plan, in their will?
Well, it's the satisfaction of knowing that you can give back to the community that you've helped to build. And that was always been my focus with particularly the Community Foundation. Often people want to provide for their family, and that's all well and good in a will or an estate plan. But they've always, many people have had long associations with the charitable works that go on here in Niagara, all of the wonderful programs, whether it's food resources, shelter resources, whether it's their home church or one of the other community groups. And if I can share, the reason I ended up with the Community Foundation is about 30 years ago, we had an estate where a gentleman had no children, no family, and he wanted to provide to his community, to the city of Port Colborne. So he selected a national organization, charity, and said, yes, I'll give you this substantial amount of money for your work in Port Colborne. And the national charity wrote back and said, well, we don't want it because we don't have a program in Port Colborne. And eventually it did get sorted out, but I thought there's a tremendous loss to this community of somebody that wants to give back. And when I happened upon introduced to Liz Palmieri, Bryan's predecessor as executive director, I said, this is exactly the vehicle that provides for long-term sustainable charitable giving, where you're not buffeted by, again, the whim of a national organization that pulls up stakes and takes the organization away and takes that money out of your community, or other political changes within an organization that results in real difficulty. So I think it was Liz who gave me, Bryan, the line that, think of the United Way as the checking account and the Community Foundation as the savings account for charities. And I've found response among many clients who basically just have that desire to leave a legacy. It may not be their entire estate. They may want to treat the charitable bequests as one of their children. So if you have 4 children, you divide it in 5 shares, provide for your children and provide for your community as well.
Excellent. Gary, how about from your perspective as someone that dealt with clients in the wealth management finance side of things?
Sure. I think the holistic approach to financial planning has to include charitable giving in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, it depends on the age of the client and the stage in life that they're in. And I would say that in general, as they age, then leaving a legacy, donating to charities in their will, or even before they pass away, becomes more and more important to them. The thing I love about the Niagara Community Foundation is the fact that I was born and raised and still live in Welland. My working career, at least the last 35 years of it, were in Port Colborne. And so my client base is in Welland and Port Colborne. And so the Niagara Community Foundation does a great job of looking after all of my clients, because there's a Welland Community Fund that they can contribute to. There's a Port Colborne Community Fund that they can contribute to. And each of those community funds support charitable causes within that community. And then there's also the United Way and the Cancer Society and all of the other great charities that are available to Canadians, and they too can be accessed through the Niagara Community Foundation. So helping my clients get to know and deal with the Niagara Community Foundation, it's kind of a one-stop option for meeting their charitable needs. And frankly, from my financial planning point of view, the Community Foundation and their staff does an excellent job with people, helping them get set up, whether it's a regular contribution monthly or whatever, or whether it's a lump sum contribution. Bryan and his staff have all of those things covered. And so turning it over to the Niagara Community Foundation is certainly something that, as a financial advisor, you don't need to fret about.
That's great, Gary. And just to let everybody know, I'm not paying these guys for their wonderful comments, but they are appreciated, and thank you for that. And
although he did call us all stars at the very
exactly. Well, a little flattery goes a long way, right? And this concept, and Chris, you alluded to it. This concept is not, spans the charitable sector, right? So this is not just about the Niagara Community Foundation. You may love what Community Care does, or what Port Cares does, or what Meals on Wheels does, whatever the case is. This spans the charitable sector, correct?
Absolutely. And it depends on exactly how you want your charitable intent to be carried out. And what I've always been impressed with the Community Foundation is the flexibility that it offers in a variety of ways of supporting an area of interest, whether it's environmental concerns or relief of poverty as sort of a general area of interest, or if it's your local congregation that you and your family have been members of for 60, 80, 100 years, and you want that to be sustained over the many years through an endowment. It basically tell us, the charitable wishes, what is it you want to do? And I certainly found, Bryan, my experience dealing with the Community Foundation usually come up a way to achieve that result.
Just, generally there's a trend in Canada that we're seeing. Two things. One is, the reality of it, and the other is an interesting sort of byproduct of it. We know that in the next number of years, there will be $1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, dollars transferred from the last generation, the baby boomer generation, to the Gen X group. So there is a tsunami tidal wave of transfer of wealth coming in Canada. And so that exchange of assets from one generation to another creates this reality. What it also creates is, what we're finding in Canada is that fewer people are giving to charities, but those that are giving more. So those are the sort of the balances. So, certainly we would love more people to give. It's been tough since the pandemic. COVID certainly had an impact on that. Demand is higher than ever for food banks and shelters and mental health, all of that support. So those are some of the realities. Gary, I'm going to direct this next one to you. Considering this tsunami of transfer of wealth, here's the situation. You're dealing with a client. They come to you and they say, Gary, my accountant tells me that I've got these bank shares that I inherited from my parents. And if I sell them, I'm going to get a big tax bill. What do I do? And then Chris, feel free to tag on to the end of that from the legal perspective. But Gary, how do you advise your client on something of that nature?
Okay, well, the big tax bill is going to be based on the capital gains that have accrued in those shares. And basically the capital gain is what the proceeds are when you sell them minus what they cost when you acquired them. That in and of itself could be a mess to calculate. And so one of the things that your accountant, your financial planner might advise is that if among all of your assets, you're able to donate those bank shares to a charity, the government says that the capital gains on those shares are waived. And so not only do you not have to pay that tax, and sometimes it's far worse, you don't have to calculate what the capital gains are. And so, that in and of itself is another significant advantage. And you know that the government has announced, but there's no legislation out yet on increasing the capital gains inclusion rate from you pay tax on 50% of it to you pay tax on 2/3 of it. I think that's what they're proposing.
66%, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is in itself another advantage then, avoiding the capital gains because you donated that portion of your holdings to a charity.
Chris, anything from your side on that?
Well, it's a very efficient way because selling the shares and then making the gift is not as efficient, as Gary has said. It can also then save the clawback of old age security if you're over 65 and have this realization. And we're getting to it now. I've run across it a couple of times recently, where there's a deemed disposition after 21 years of shares, so that it's a very efficient way of doing it, and can preserve your tax situation, and you keep your old age pension that you worked all your life for.
Do we have any questions from the audience that you wanted to interject with, or are we doing anything from the assembled audience?
Thanks very much. That's a great reminder that we are looking forward to questions. We do have a question from someone that's involved with a charity, and they're wondering about exploring funding so that they can do their work. So they're hoping to, maybe talk to you, Bryan, about getting some funding from the community foundation, etc.
Sure.
So I think that maybe you can answer that question.
Yep.
I would ask that you maybe underscore it. As someone, I've worked in the charitable sector before, and actually
Absolutely.
worked with some very generous individuals who have donated shares. But can you underscore that for folks? I heard you say it, Chris, but they don't sell it first, they donate. So can you just underscore what's the process? Because that's where the benefit is. I don't know if I can leave that to you, Bryan, or whoever wants to talk about that, but
Sure,
what is the
I'm happy
process?
to.
They have this issue. Do they sell it? Do they not, etc.?
Yeah, it's a great point, Dave. And first of all, for anybody, any charities out there, please check out our website, niagaracommunityfoundation.org. And if you are a charity, there's a charity and grants tab. Click on that. You can review all of our charitable our granting programs, and reach out to my colleague Joanne Crick. She is our grants guru, brains of the operation on the grant side. So reach out to Joanne Crick. Check out our website for anybody that's looking for charitable granting support. Regarding the question about the donation of stocks and securities, so the Community Foundation, we've been very fortunate. We work with a great partner, Chris Bigger at BMO Nesbitt Burns, who serves as our broker. So what would happen is, if you did have stocks and securities that you wanted to transfer, say, you had some assets with Gary, what would happen is Gary would transfer, or your portfolio manager, your investment firm would transfer those gift in kind securities directly to, in this case, the Niagara Community Foundation. We have a form that you would fill out. Those assets would then be transferred over to our bank. They would then be liquidated and deposited into our account. And then you would receive a tax receipt for the full value of those assets that then you could use towards your taxes for a number of years. So it's actually a pretty streamlined process, and a lot of charities are set up to receive stocks and security transfers because it's such a benefit to donors. Yeah, Gary or Chris, anything that you want to add to that little tidbit I gave there?
No, it's a simple process. I'm a trustee of my congregation, and we've got it set up as well. It's seamless. It's easy, almost easier than writing a check.
Sometimes if you're selling, here's a little nuance to that. If you are selling some mutual funds take a little bit longer because they are a little more complicated. And within mutual funds, they often come from, a specific fund from, say, Manulife or something like that. And so transferring the ownership of those sort of secured or those sort of assets can be a little trickier. And it takes the receiving broker a longer time to liquidate those. So just be aware that there are some nuances. But if you talk to your friendly neighborhood community foundation executive director, I'm sure they would be happy to walk you through that process. And also your portfolio manager, your investment advisor would also have that similar advice for sure.
And I just wanted to comment on, so I'm a financial advisor, and Bryan talked about my clients' assets being transferred from me. And my first interaction with the Niagara Community Foundation was with Liz Palmieri, the executive director at the time. And my first reaction to her was, well, I get paid on my clients' assets that are under my administration. Why would I want to transfer those out to the Niagara Community Foundation? And to be honest, it was kind of a short-sighted comment at the time from a relatively new and inexperienced financial advisor. Because the truth is, as I mentioned earlier, that overall financial planning and working in your client's best interest, in most cases, as they age, includes a charitable giving component. And it will go a lot more efficiently and smoothly for them if you are involved in that as their financial planner than if you are not involved in it.
Just to spin off that, Gary, and this is for both of you, so feel free to, respond. What is your experience, both, from the legal side, Chris and Gary, as you've helped clients make strong, healthy financial decisions? Those that have been reticent, hesitant to leave money to charity, what are the things that they're sharing with you? And then, what advice would you give them if they said to you, okay, well, what's your advice and why should I do this?
Well, one of the concerns, and this is a pet peeve of mine, is that I think charitable giving, you need to be educated and you need to know where your money is going. And I've always been concerned that people very glibly say, oh, I'll just send it to ABC. They do this good work. But they don't drill down to see, what sort of administrative costs, management costs, how much money is actually getting to the end user. And I've been shocked in some cases as to what that administrative and fundraising burden is. Anytime you get these direct mail solicitations from charities, you are paying for that with your donation. So when I've brought the attention to the Community Foundation, and Bryan, you can do your own commercial announcement, but the administrative burden and the investment management burden is negligible. It's I think still runs under 2% of the assets, as I'm correct.
Yeah,
Bryan?
we're right at 2%. Yeah,
Right at 2%, and the so that the people are getting one assurance that their money is going to the use that they intended, whether it's relief of poverty or housing or an environmental program or children's education or mental health. And it really makes a difference to many charities to have that kind of sustained funding over a number of years in a stream of income out of the earnings that the endowment earns, as opposed to a lump sum. They get a lump sum. I've struggled with this in my own role, is just trying to get a reasonable return on your money, particularly when the interest rates were so low over the last number of years. The $50,000 or $100,000 you get as a one-time gift, you can't really make it grow by trying to get a secure return. And the Community Foundation, I think, has had an impressive rate of return. So it really achieves their goal of having real dollars go to the charitable use that they wanted.
The thing I would like to add is in one of my clients' case, she and her husband had lived in Toronto, and then he had passed away, and she moved to Port Colborne to live with a friend of hers. And she was so impressed by the Port Colborne community and the fact that she could walk to the library and for shopping and to church and things like that, that she felt like she wanted to leave. And she and her husband didn't have any children. There were some nieces and nephews that they wanted to leave some money to, but they were going to have a substantial estate beyond that. And so she wanted to leave some money for the Port Colborne community. She liked the work that Port Cares was doing, but her husband and she had always supported an international charity, and I apologize that the name escapes me. I think that's what happens after you retire, but you probably know the charity. It's the one where you donate and they provide nets for children to sleep under so they don't get bit and get
Oh,
malaria and things like that. So
is that
she
World
made,
Vision, maybe, Gary? Does that sound, is it World Vision?
you know what, that could be it. So basically, she left the estate to the Niagara Community Foundation and indicated, after she left money for the nieces and nephews and her friend who, had helped her move to Port Colborne, she left it and split it between this international charity and a very local one committed to the community in Port Colborne. And it just it just made a whole lot of sense for her, and she felt very, very comfortable doing that.
Just to follow up on a point that Chris made, just about, charities and expenses and things of that nature. Charitable organizations in many ways are businesses, in that, you've got to pay payroll. There are expenses. You've got to pay for a physical. You think about a food bank, or a place like Family and Children's Services. They have physical structures. They have to pay rent. They have to pay for bills. Like those are all expenses. So things to just keep in mind. And the other thing is, you also have to pay, qualified, capable people to run those programs. You can't just have a program with no one to run it, right? And that's human resources. And to find positive human resources, people that are, know what they're doing, run an efficient program, that all costs a little bit of money. So there is definitely a balance between, an organization that might pay for Super Bowl ads versus, someone just, running some YouTube or Facebook advertising, right? So yeah, you got to spend a little bit of money to make some money and draw attention to yourself as a charity. So, Chris, this next one, I'm going to ask you to start, and then Gary, you feel free to add a layer. A client comes to you and says, leaving money in a charity in my will seems really complicated, and overwhelming. What's your response, and how do you sort of alleviate their fears?
Well, I said the wills that I've had, I can just tell you, with charitable beneficiaries have been a lot easier to administer than when you have families. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it can just get very difficult. I mean, my experience in dealing with charities has been by and large excellent. They're appreciative. They usually have, again, well-trained employees who understand what their obligations are. As an executor, you have to account to the beneficiaries, but they understand that level where some lay people don't, or have questions, or want to rewrite the will because they don't like what Aunt Sally did. And there's some education that needs to go on there. And whether it's a fixed amount, you can set a bequest of, $10,000, or you can leave them with a percentage of the estate. Either way, I've never found any undue complications.
Gary, how about from your perspective in dealing with your clients in the past? Anybody that felt overwhelmed, and how did you, sort of calm the waters there?
Sure. A couple of things. Initially, people aren't sure that they are in a position financially to leave money to a charity because they're concerned about their kids and their grandkids, and will they have enough. I think as they also worry about whether their kids are capable of handling a large estate if they get it earlier on in life. And so, there are those kinds of concerns. But I think as we chat with them and as they age, I always tell people, The perfect scenario is you run out of money the day the second of the spouses passes away. And what are the chances of that happening? 0, right? So the only other two options are you run out of money before the second spouse passes away, and no one wants to deal with that scenario, right? So the one that's likely to happen is that you have extra assets when the second of the spouses passes away. And so that suggests that there will be an estate. And then the question is, how much of that estate needs to go to children and grandchildren, and how much can go to the community that has supported you and the groups that have supported you along the way. And so I think that's where the charitable giving comes in. Now, the other thing I'm a big proponent of, and I may have to thank Liz Palmieri for opening my eyes way back when, I tell parents that they should consider when they have a windfall, or when they have a large amount of money come in, like they decide to sell the family home. They
Or the
should
family
consider.
business.
I'm sorry?
Or the family business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They should consider gifting some of that money to their family at that time, so that they're here to see their reaction, that they're here for them to say, oh, wow, I can't believe it. Thanks a lot. There's a lot to be said for that. And so that's why I think people need to be looking at the giving side of it, whether it's to family or to charities, sooner than they have been considering doing that.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
I said
So
just the line I had from a client, and I can't claim authorship, is better to give with a warm hand than a cold hand.
absolutely, Chris. I've heard that one a number of times myself. So, this one's a bit of a softball. Is it beneficial to also give to your favorite charity of choice, from your perspectives while you're living as well?
Well, absolutely. You're giving, you might be giving $100, but basically 40 of those dollars were going to go to the government anyhow. So that I've always encouraged people to do that, and consider that, you're able to support the causes that are important to you, but not spending all of your own money. You're spending some money that would otherwise have gone to Ottawa or Queen's Park.
Yeah, and what Chris is referring to there is the charitable donation deduction that you get. And, the government likes to encourage giving in their population. And so the way they do that is with the charitable donation receipt. And as Chris says, it can mean up to a 40% reduction in the income tax you were going to have to pay anyway.
That's right. Dave, any questions from the audience at this point?
There aren't any additional questions from the audience, but I'd encourage the audience members to give us some questions. So thanks very much. I did, maybe are you looking for a question?
Dave, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I just for somebody that's sort of listening to this and thinking about it and wondering, and especially Gary, I think somebody that you talked about, they don't really maybe understand or can appreciate how much their estate might be. Like they might be scared and say, is there going to be enough for my beneficiaries? What would you tell them? How easy is it? And second, what's a way around? They want to be generous, they want to support charities, but they also want to support their beneficiaries. And Chris, you talked about a sort of a percentage or a share or versus a lump sum amount. So I think something, just how easy is it, and what are some things that many of the folks do that you've worked with?
Chris, did you want to take that, or did you want
Well,
me?
I'll start because, I mean, people say to me, oh, well, I don't have that kind of money. I don't have a lot of money to hand out. And one of the programs that I have been involved with, and Gary as well, with the Community Foundation is, I had kids going to school and, kids getting married. So, but I've forgotten how many years ago now, I started a fund in my parents' name, and it's $100 a month off my credit card. And that now is a substantial amount of money that has grown. It continues on, but I don't even notice that it's gone. So it's a way that I've been able to establish that, build a legacy, and as I said, I don't know. I get the receipt every year. It comes electronically. You pay the credit card bill. It's a lot less than I'm paying for cable and internet these days. So I don't, you don't even notice that it's gone. So it can be that simple. To get that started. And it also then gives you an eye on where those dollars are going and how they're being used, so that you can adjust your charitable wishes and desires while you're still here and alive. So
I think I might have said this in Waynefleet also, Brian, but I think it's time for Chris to increase that from $100 a month to maybe $150 or $200 a month, right?
Jay, thanks, Gary.
Okay, so
I
let
don't
me
notice
tell
the
you.
100.
The truth is, after a couple of months, you won't notice the 200. Anyway, let me tell you about the Talassi family experience after Liz Palmieri opened my eyes. My wife and I are both born and raised in Welland, still live there, or we raised our family there. But in 1995, I moved my business to Port Colborne and have operated successfully there since 1995. So we decided to set up two funds, one in Welland called the Angie and Gary Talassi Family Fund, and one in Port Colborne called the Gary Talassi Thanks Port Colborne Fund. And we've been making monthly contributions to them, equal contributions. I'm not sure for how long, because like Chris, we don't feel it. But I want you to know that we get a report every year from the Community Foundation on the value of each of those funds. We know how much they're donating, how much they're making available in Welland and in Port Colborne, and we know the growth rate on the investments, and with the Niagara Community Foundation. And as a financial advisor, that's an important figure in my mind, and I can assure you that the Niagara Community Foundation is doing a good job of managing the assets that people have with them through their endowment fund. And we didn't touch on endowment specifically, but what that means is your contribution is a large sum of money. And each year in Welland, the Welland Community Fund, a certain percentage comes out of that fund, and also in Port Colborne to fund charitable causes in those two communities. So we've built an endowment, a sum of money, which is intended then to provide money for charitable causes in perpetuity.
And we also have charitable, community funds in, the other municipalities as well. We have field of interest funds, etc. We have a slate, but um, Dave, that's a great question. On the macro level, if I may just kind of chime in on that, we always encourage anybody that's considering a fund with us, and whether it's the Niagara Community Foundation or another charity of your choice, to those that are out there, work with we refer to them as allied professionals, because they're professional people. They understand their business. They understand their profession. They're lawyers, they're fund managers, they're wealth managers, they're tax accountants. Rely on the people that you've built up that relationship with over years. Most people have had the same tax person for a number of years. They've had the same lawyer for a number of years. And what we're really finding these days, and what's really rewarding, is that more and more people like Gary and Chris, and someone from DJB Tax, they're working together on behalf of you, their client, because they're trying to make things work what's best for you. And Gary said that, at the outset, is these individuals are working together for your benefit. And your tax accountant and your wealth manager are going to look at what your assets are, and they can advise you. And they say, we think that this, you could, leave X amount of dollars or a certain percentage of your estate. And you should go work with, your lawyer to get that into your will, and then you can approach the community foundation. We actually have language that we can send to your lawyer. That's a simple paragraph. So if you establish a fund with us, that paragraph really gets copy and pasted into your will. One-stop shopping for the lawyer, really easy going. But all of those decisions have been made with you understanding what the impact is on your financial landscape. And that's really important for people to do that. Ultimately, you are going to support the community. You're going to take care of your family first and foremost. But it's a benefit of you to make charitable allowances in your estate plan, because there's a tax benefit, and also the community wins. Everybody wins in this situation.
That's great. So it sounds like it's as easy as, if I'm just thinking about this, talk to the folks that I already get advice from. Is that?
Absolutely. That's exactly. And the other thing is, if I often will speak to a fund manager or a lawyer who has said, listen, I've got a client and they want to leave some money to charity. What do you advise? And then for me, we're a choose your own adventure book. So, as Chris said, and Gary both said, the community foundation, we can go in a lot of different ways, but we're also happy to advise people on other amazing charities. We're very fortunate in Niagara. There are so many wonderful local community groups that do huge things in Niagara, our community. So I often will give recommendations if I'm asked. But for a lot of people, because we are one-stop shopping, you can leave money to an education group, an environmental group, and a food bank, all with us, right? One-stop shopping. But it is as simple as that, Dave. And a lot of allied professionals will reach out to charities and ask, how do I do this? And once they do it once, they know they can do it again.
How do you find people are thinking about this, Chris? I think when you spoke earlier, you're saying, there's a lot of folks out there that might be, currently supporting their church, or they're currently supporting another charity. Is that how you find people think about this for the future, to say, once you've passed, you built up that relationship over the last X years, right, with this particular charity or with this church or whatever that is. How would you like that to continue once you've passed on? Is that how you approach it, Chris? Or
Well, it usually it's client driven. I mean, they raise it. I mean, sometimes it's obvious if there are no children or close family direct descendants, they come in with this idea of they would like to leave a legacy and make a change. I do find it with loyal church members, and many of them these days I don't think it's any news if you're not there that many churches and congregations are struggling. And so I want to support my congregation. I want to make sure that it's there because I've been there for the last 50 years and loved it, and they've supported me, and I want to provide that. But further, I mean, they're also concerned that in many denominations, they're concerned about head office, that they want the money used locally. They want it for their pastor, for their mission programs of their local congregation. They're not interested in sending it, off to head office in Toronto, which is what very often can happen with many congregations. And with an endowment with a community foundation, you can provide for that. For as long as this congregation is in existence, I want the money to go there. But should they fail, then I want it to go to perhaps another congregation, the same denomination locally, or some other charitable work for relief of the poor or other community organization. As I said, the flexibility is almost infinite to build exactly what the client wants. And the community foundation, again, it's not every day, it's not every week, it's, it comes up, a couple of times a year. But for the right person, it's exactly the avenue that they can use if that's what their desires are.
We don't have any other questions here. I guess the question, if I can keep, unless you have other things, Bryan, that you wanted
No,
to
go ahead. No,
underscore,
Dave,
but
this is great to have you
yeah.
tune in here.
But the idea of how often should one think about this or revisit it? I think about a relative of mine who put a lump sum payment into their will. This was several years ago that they wrote their will. They passed, and their estate accrued a substantial amount, both because of some investments that they had, but more importantly, I think because of housing prices and the value of their home. Any comments about how often somebody should revisit this or think about this, or even with family members? When I'm writing a will and my kids are 20, when should I revisit it, sort of thing, because their lives have established and there's those kind of things. So any comments on that?
Chris, you're the legal expert
legal
there.
one,
What
people
would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I get infinite questions on, well, I need to review my will because the law has changed. Well, there have been some recent changes involving marriage and separation, divorce, common law couples. But I try to emphasize to people, it's, your circumstances. When your circumstances change, that's when you should be reviewing the situation. Dave, you said, you've got children of tender years, you're still supporting. Obviously, your primary legal obligation is to provide for them. But as they get settled in their 30s and 40s, I've had parents, quite happily see their children, be tremendously successful in the working world. And I had one client some years ago who said, well, I don't think they have any idea how much money I have. And she had a substantial portfolio, but she had been a very shrewd investor. And she said, I want to make sure they're provided for, but I want to make sure they keep working. I don't want to provide them with enough money that they're just going to sit back and retire and clip coupons the rest of their lives. So it's those kinds of circumstances. And she did review the will over the years as the family grew and grandchildren arrived and the charitable mix changed. So, 3 to 5 years is probably a reasonable timeline if you had no other change of circumstance.
You seem to have frozen there.
Yeah, Chris might be frozen in carbonite there.
I'll continue. If the will is set up with a certain percentage of the assets going to beneficiaries, then it may not need review quite as often as if it's a specified lump sum that's stated, because then that isn't keeping up with housing prices and inflation and those kinds of things. So I think early on Chris said something about if you have 4 children, then consider dividing your estate in 5 shares. Well, that's kind of a way to deal with the issue that you mentioned, Dave. But certainly you need a will as soon as you have debt and dependents, and so you should have one early on, and then you should update it. I say when the kids are off the payroll, then certainly it's time to update it. And then once they've established themselves and there are grandchildren involved, then you probably want to be updating it again. And then if, for instance, what's happened in the housing market, because a house is so much an important portion of people's estates, what's happened recently is probably another good reason to update your will.
That's all exact advice that I would have shared too. Yeah.
Sure.
We're punching up against the end of the time here for the lunch and learn, but I think it's an important point given where we are today. So we're recording this at the end of May in 2024, and there is this legislative change that the federal government is making in June. There was an allusion to it earlier about that. Any recommendations? Because people are probably thinking, what's this mean for my estate? What does this mean for my portfolio? What does this mean for my holdings? Any comment on that?
I think a quick call to your financial advisor and asking whether they think there's a significant change in your situation, which should be dealt with before the drop dead date in June, then that's probably the most appropriate thing that you can do.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that one, Dave, is always reaching out to your allied professionals is a great first step. On the that inclusion rate or that rate is going to go up, so there will be, so capital gains will be, you'll have to pay a little bit more, but ultimately if you are making that charitable donation, it's not gonna be that sting. And again, it's a modest increase, right? So you're still in a good shape. Again, it's a gain on capital, so you're in a good spot. But ultimately, if you need to make some changes really quickly, then you need to talk to your financial planner as soon as you can.
And on the personal taxation side, if it doesn't affect you unless there's over $250,000 of capital gains.
That's right.
In the year. It
Yeah.
is more important on the trust side and the corporation side, not so much on the personal side.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I see we have Chris back from being frozen there. So
Technology, challenged, and suddenly I lost my internet connection. So who knows what goes on out in the ether.
well, it's great, and I think we're coming to the end of the programming here. Any last comments? And from anybody, and I think Bryan, we certainly want, if folks want to get a hold of you, if you could let us know. But any comments from Gary and Chris before we turn it over to Bryan?
No, make
I
your
would
point
say-
of inquiry, Bryan. They've got an excellent staff.
Yeah. And from a financial planning point of view, you should establish a relationship with the Niagara Community Foundation through Bryan and his staff, because somewhere along the line, you will have at least one client who is better served for the connection that you made with the Niagara Community Foundation.
It's great. And actually, I'm going to pipe in here. We have a family fund as well. It was real easy to set up with the community foundation and donate to that. So Bryan, how do folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, very easy, Dave. Through our website, niagaracommunityfoundation.org. You can track me down by email, by phone. All of our information is there. I've got an amazing staff team, as Chris and Gary have alluded to. There are 4 of us that are full-time. So if you have a specific inquiry, let us know. Our team is always here to help and provide some advice and really just we love to listen and hear what you want to do with your philanthropy. And that's what the Community Foundation is for. So thank you so much to the Chamber and to everybody for tuning in today. Just really grateful for this wonderful partnership, and never hesitate to reach out to NCF.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bryan. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Chris. We're getting a lot of thank yous
Dave.
here on the chat. So thanks to those that participated and tuned in and asked questions. Thanks so much to Amanda and the Job Gym for the great work that you do, including sponsoring the Lunch and Learn series. We actually have another one coming up on June 18th. There she is, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us. We have one
Thank
coming
you,
up
Amanda.
on
Thanks,
June
man.
18th. And so people, please watch your emails for that. A link about what's coming up, especially in the What's Up Wednesday email. So I think this concludes our presentation today. Thanks again to Bryan, Gary, Chris. Excellent conversation and very, very timely given what's going on in the world and with people thinking about things. So thank you for that. Thanks again, Amanda. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great
Thank you.
afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye now.